everyone, my name is Jake and this is a two-part video about my exosomes experience. The first part I filmed pre-exosomes and it's about how I made the decision to go ahead with exosomes therapy. And then the second part of the video is me post-exosomes. I tell you a little bit more about my experience, and then I also tell you that I have made a new Facebook group that is only for patients called Exosomes Experiences. If you want to add yourself to my Exosomes Experiences Facebook support group, there will be a link below in the video description box. So if you want to learn a little bit more about exosomes and my experiences so far, please keep on watching. Guess what I did? I temporarily dyed my hair. Okay, today is T-minus 15 hours to getting exosomes. What do I want to say about exosomes? Let's actually start with what exosomes are. That's a good question. And I don't entirely know the answer to it, but in layperson's terms, exosomes are little bubbles, and many different types of cells have exosomes. And you can think of them as little packages that help cells communicate with each other. I think, and I'll edit it out if I get this wrong, but I think they contain microRNA, messenger RNA, and other important microbiological things that I have no understanding of. So you can take exosomes from different types of cells, but the types of exosomes that are being used therapeutically now are derived from MSCs. And MSCs stands for, and I've heard two different pronunciations of this, but mesenchymal and mesenchymal stem cells. And these stem cells are taken from the placenta of ostensibly healthy mothers. Now let's talk about the difference between exosomes and stem cells. Exosomes are not the full cell, and stem cells are. And stem cells, the risks with that is they have the ability to proliferate in the body, which is a tumor risk. So that's not great. There is more of a risk with the stem cell of a negative immunological response to them. And if you go on the Facebook groups, you hear anecdotally of people doing stem cells and having bad mast cell reactions. Exosomes, on the other hand, don't have these risks. Ostensibly. I mean, this is all really experimental. I, as a patient, am very adverse to anything experimental. So when my doctor suggested exosomes, I was like, what the hell is that? And I went on a few Facebook groups to see if I could find out more information. And there's not that many Facebook groups on exosomes specifically. There are on stem cells. So I get added to this group, and my mom added herself as well. And the first thing that she found was 5 different people saying that they had one brand of exosomes from one doctor, and they all had UTIs that were very refractory to treatment. One woman said it required months of antibiotics. Another man had to get a PICC line. What the hell, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And I brought the idea of exosomes to a couple other of my doctors, but even a doctor that does experimental or out-of-the-box medicine, if they don't do a particular experimental thing, they're not going to say, yeah, go ahead and do it, because it's not comfortable for them. Doctors are going to suggest what they're comfortable with and not suggest what they're not comfortable with, sometimes independent of what really actually makes sense or what is true or what their literature shows or what clinical practice shows. But I continued to read on the groups about exosomes, and I found a blog by a doctor. His name is Dr. Ed Park. He's got about 37 blog posts on his first year using exosomes. And as doctors do, they first use it on themselves, then they use it on their, in this case, his mother, and then he started using it on patients. Caveat here, if I ever suggest a book or an article or anything to you, that doesn't mean I agree with every single little thing that's written in said book, article, whatever. But I think Ed Park's blog, he's pretty funny. He also, acknowledges that the placebo effect exists, and the placebo effect can be quite strong, but his outcomes are pretty good. So I was intrigued. So in one of those Facebook groups, there is this PhD, he's built out 2 exosome labs. He very graciously answered, and I very annoyingly asked a bunch of questions. And that gave me another little nudge towards maybe opening my mind to this. Let me pontificate a bit on like going with your gut. I have to say, as a person, I'm somewhat like skeptical of going with your gut, and that'll like lead you to the right place. And like sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Like plenty of people went with their gut with stem cells and spent $25,000 and didn't get any better, or sometimes got worse. Like those people went with their gut, like that didn't turn out so great with them. Depending on how all of this goes, either going with my gut really is going to work out for me or it's not. And I guess it could actually end up in the middle, and that would just be nothing happen at all, and we just, you know, lit money on fire, which wouldn't be the worst thing with this illness. So then I called my friend and I was like, okay, 2 of my doctors told me to like not do it, or were like, they weren't like, don't do it, but they weren't like, you know, they weren't advising me to do it. Okay, so they sort of advised me not to do it, and I was like, still somewhat leaning towards it because like I'm like going with my gut. So I was talking with my friend. I want to make sure that like I'm going with my gut, but like in a smart way. And he was like, why don't you set some criteria that if your doctor, when you ask him questions about the exosomes, he doesn't meet those criteria, you can't go back afterwards and change your mind. I said to him, okay, so my criteria are, he has to, A, really assure me that the chances of me getting worse are very, very low. The second criteria was he has to give me the name of the exosome lab. And the third, I guess they're criterion. The whole thing is criteria. So the third criterion was he has to like give me a couple of people who have done exosomes, his patients. So then on our second visit with the doctor about exosomes, I had a whole list of questions. He answered every single one. He assured me that the chances of becoming worse and or substantially worse and or permanently and or semi-permanently were very small. He connected me with a couple of patients that I talked to, but he didn't give me the lab name. So after all of that, I was really leaning towards doing it without him telling me the name that the exosomes come from. And then I was like, I cannot go back to my friend and say that I'm doing this experimental therapy and that I flaked on what he told me to do. And like, wouldn't it be terrible if like something bad happened to me after I do it and then I have to go back to my friend and be like, you know, I did it and now I'm worse, and then he's gonna be like, did you stick to the criteria? And I'm like, no. Like that would just be embarrassing. So like, I don't want to be embarrassed. So I emailed the doctor. He gave me the name of the lab. I'm looking at the lab. I'm like, okay, this website looks pretty legit. I mean, that means nothing, but still. I asked the microbiologist if he's heard of this lab, and he's like, so he goes, I haven't heard of that lab. I know most of the exosome labs. And then he's like, and who's their scientist? They don't even have like scientists on their board of directors. And so I was like, that's not good. So my mom clicked around the website, went to their board of directors page, and she sees that there's this doctor, and she's like, isn't that the dad of your friend from middle school? So it turns out that the chief medical officer of the exosome lab is the dad of my friend that I've known since I was literally 12. So I like really know this family. It was such a relief. I felt so grateful, not only to like know the doctor that's sitting on the board of directors, but also that like I can just text him and call him. You know, after I saw that, I was like, I'm sold. I'm doing this. It was meant to be. Follow your gut. We'll see tomorrow if I'm saying that. What he told me was that first, the placenta from which they derive the exosomes are taken from healthy mothers. So that's like the first step. And then he just said that they're like scrupulously
filtering.
Scrupulously. Someone who works in an art gallery, they
curate.
So they're scrupulously curated, like at every step of the way. So they're tested for HIV, hepatitis, you know, a bunch of what we think of as like the main pathogens. But beyond that, they're ultra filtrated. He also described them as immunomodulatory, which is what people who are in the pro-exosome, I don't know if there's like an anti-exosome, but people in the exosome community describe them as immunomodulatory, and they describe them as anti-inflammatory. And he said basically he thinks like they're pretty safe. I told him about my mast cell activation syndrome. He didn't say, oh, I think that would exacerbate it. So we did discuss about, those 5 people who had very refractory UTIs. I tried to message some of them on Facebook, and 2 of them got back to me. It actually ended up not being what it appeared to be for some of them. Some of them may have contracted the UTI just after the exosomes, so maybe it wasn't that they had a UTI, like a latent UTI. So who knows? It's all anecdotal, but upon more digging, it didn't seem to quite be as bad as what it first appeared to be. Tomorrow, I go in, 8:15 a.m. I'm trying not to get too excited. My mom always says, like, don't go to Z. Like, if you're A, don't go all the way to Z. But, like, I'm like, why? I want it to work. And up until this point, I really didn't fully understand what it feels like to jump on the newest, most promising therapy, even if it might be snake oil or the science isn't quite there yet, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so prior to now, I'm like, look at all those lemmings jumping off a cliff. This was the first time I really felt vulnerable to becoming a lemming. Also, actually, I looked it up. Lemmings don't jump off cliffs. It's a myth. And do you know what a lemming is? I thought it was a bird. It's a vole. It's a vole. It's a vole. And I've talked about voles before. Voles have Bartonella, and maybe that's why they're jumping off of cliffs. And so that's actually why I talked to my friend on the phone. I wanted someone to help me not be a lemming. And so that's what the criteria were for.
They're very helpful.
I have good friends. There are things that I know and things that I don't know. And what I don't know is if exosomes work as well as pro-exosome people say they do at this point. I don't know if they're gonna work for me. But, hi Pipey, come here. What I do know is that my doctor is not suggesting this expensive therapy to me to profit off me, and that's really important. Other than that, good night and good luck to me. Oh yeah, I'm rubbing your bell. So this was part 1 of my exosome journey. There hopefully will be a part 2 unless I die. Hi! Obviously I didn't die. I'm back from the future 15 days post exosomes to tell you about my experience. Nothing negative or positive happened during the infusion, and nothing negative or positive happened in the 15 days since the infusion. Knock knock on wood. And honestly, nothing bad happening is a huge win for me. Almost every single medication I try, I react to. So either the exosomes really are not immunogenic or immunostimulating, or there was nothing in them. Since getting exosomes, I've learned a little bit more about them. My doctor gave an online webinar. I think it's going to be available online somehow. It just hasn't gone up yet. As I said in the beginning of this video, there aren't a lot of Facebook groups that are focused on exosomes alone. Actually, I don't think there's any. And those groups, they allow patients in, but they also allow doctors who provide exosomes in, scientists who work in exosome research and or labs, and other stakeholders. And while that's totally fine, and there should be groups where all of those people can interact, I see a need for a Facebook support group that's for patients only, without the influence of these people who may stand to benefit financially from the success of exosomes. So I made a new Facebook group. It's called Exosomes Experiences, and I'm going to leave the link in the video description down below. And this will be a place where patients feel comfortable talking about the treatment that they received, the exosomes brand that their doctor uses, their doctor and their satisfaction or dissatisfaction with their doctor. And hopefully we can collate some anecdotal information that will benefit patients more than anyone else. results. Earlier in the video, I did mention Dr. Ed Park's blog. One of the blogs talks about the politics of exosomes. From his perspective, there's backstabbing and rumors, and I just wanted to read you this quote from his blog. I don't think they realize they're playing a game that may be less than zero-sum. In game theory, a game where someone's loss is my gain is zero-sum. In this case, if all the attacks succeed, everyone can suffer, including patients. So if you're interested in learning more about exosomes, or if you have already done exosome therapy, please add yourself to my new group. I want to get as much information as possible. We need your input. So in less than 2 weeks from today, I'm going to do the larger dose of exosomes, and I will definitely update you on how that goes as well. So if you want to get notified about how my exosomes experiences continue to go, please hit that subscribe button, and thanks for watching.